Hello and welcome to the third video of Section 7. In this video we're going to create a third desktop pool. So in this video we're going to create a third desktop pool which will use an instant clone image of the Windows 10 Gold image that we built previously. This pool will also have a non-persistent assignment. Before we go and actually create the desktop pool itself, there's one configuration task we need to complete first, and that's our instant clone domain admins. So here we have our view administrator. So you can see here's our system health. So from the inventory, we need to go over here, expand view configuration, and select this option here, instant clone domain admins, and click on there. So now we see our instant clone engine domain administrators. We click add. We see the add domain admin box, so the full domain name. So if you had multiple domains, they would be listed in here. We just have the one, so we click our pvolab.com. And then enter a username. So we're going to use the administrator account. So we type that in there. And the administrator password. And then click OK. Basically, this is the account that will create the machine accounts within Active Directory. The machine accounts in this case being the instant clone machines that get built. So they're joined to the domain, so they can be managed, policies, GPOs, etc., etc. So now we've done that, we can go ahead and actually build the desktop pool itself now. To do that, we go to Catalog, expand that, Desktop Pools, and we can see the other two we built previously, so we're going to add a third. So here we see the Add Desktop Pool configuration screen, and the first option is the type of desktop pool. So in this case, we're going to build an automated desktop pool. Next, continue. And now we see the user assignment. So is this going to be dedicated, i.e. the user owns the desktop effectively, and they get the same desktop each time they log in, or a floating desktop. So basically one that gets randomly selected out of the pool of desktop machines that they log in, it gets built, and then when they log off again, it's all gone. Particularly with instant clones, machine's gone, as is their profile, etc., ready for the next machine. Next, to continue. And we see our vCenter server settings. So this is basically which vCenter server is going to be responsible for building the instant clone. So first of all, we're going to select that it's going to be instant clone. We could also have link clones or full virtual machines. And then from the list, we select our vCenter server that's going to build these particular instant clones. We only have one in this list, so we'll select just the one. If you had more vCenter servers, they would be listed in here. Next, to continue. Next is our ID. So what's the ID for this pool? As you can see in the background, you can actually see the old IDs or the IDs of the pools we created previously. So we'll follow that pattern. We'll call this Win10-IC, so we know it's instant clones, and then a display name. Don't forget the display name is what the end users will see. So we're going to call this Windows 10 Instant Clone. Then we can create an access group that allows us to group machines for delegated management tasks, etc. Or we could also give it a description. That's optional. We don't have to give it a description, but if you want to kind of explain more what this desktop pool is about, you can do that. So next, to continue. And now we see our desktop pool settings. And the first section, general, state, is the pool on or off, i.e. can users access the desktops within it or can't they? So simply enabled or disabled. Connection server restrictions, we click on browse. So this is using the tagging feature. So I could tag a connection server so that desktop pools can only be accessed from a particular connection server. So if I, for example, click the radio button to restrict to these tags, all my tagged connection servers would pop up here. So an example of this would be maybe an external connection. So I would tag my connection servers that are paired with security servers as maybe external. So I know that they're always going to come in, or end users will only be able to connect to the pool from those servers. So we're going to have no restrictions and click OK. And then finally in the general section, the category folder. So this basically will put a list of folders. We don't have any, which is why that's just popped up. Puts a shortcut to the desktop pool directly on the client's device. So they can double click and go straight into the pool without having to go through the client first. So if you turn that on, you could select the category folder, you could create a new folder there, and click the add button, and you could also put shortcut locations in the start menu or launcher and or the desktop. So we're not going to use those in the lab, so we just go past that setting. So next we have remote settings. First one is automatically log off after disconnect. So what happens when a user gets disconnected from their session? Do they get logged off? So in this case, no, they don't. They never get logged off. If I chose immediately, then if they got disconnected, they would immediately be logged off the desktop. Desktop will go back into the pool, etc., and be ready for another user. Or we could go for after and then specify an amount of time. So we're going to say never. One thing to be aware of with this setting is that if you disconnect and log off in a short period of time, it doesn't really cover for a network glitch. So maybe the end user's working away and for whatever reason the network just drops out for a few seconds. In this case, it would pick up that that was a disconnect, and it would also log them off the desktop. So when they log back in, they'd have to go back through the login process, the desktop would need to be built for them, and it would just basically slow down the process of them getting back up and running, and it would also put some more load unnecessarily on your infrastructure to go and create another desktop. So look out for that particular setting. Do we want users to restart their machines? That's a simple yes or no. Allow user to initiate a separate session from a different client device. So what happens by default is if you go and log on from another device, then it will go straight back into the same session. So it'll be the same session on both devices. With this option, it would allow you to go and pick up a second device and load a second session. So 2 desktops or 2 lots of apps, whichever. Watch out for the licensing on that one, both from Horizon and your license for the app that you're using, because the same user will be using 2. Next, we have the remote display protocol. Default display protocol. What are they going to use by default? RDP, PC over IP, or BLAST? Do we want the user to change their protocol or to choose their protocol? Yes or no? Use case for this is maybe you use PC over IP. They're out and about in a coffee shop. They try to connect and port 4172 is being blocked. And what the user will see is basically a black screen. So they've gone in, they've got their desktop, but the desktop can't be displayed back to them because it's been blocked on the way out. That means the user can't use their desktop. That's bad. So what they can do is disconnect and then choose a different protocol that doesn't use that port and probably won't be blocked. So you might want to use that setting if you have external users. Maybe not internal users, but certainly external. 3D renderer, who's going to be responsible for managing that? The vSphere client, or in this case an NVIDIA Grid virtual graphics card. And then the last couple of sections, HTML access. Can the user access their desktop from a browser? Yes or no? It does require the installation of the HTML access feature on the connection server and on the agent, etc. So make sure you've done that first. And then finally, allow session collaboration, the ability for users to share data, etc. on or off. Note here it says requires VMware BLAST protocol. Be aware that if you change this to PC over IP, it still allows you to select that option. However, it won't work because it needs BLAST. Then we have the flash settings for each session. Flash quality, we can do not control it, low, medium or high. Be aware that this does have bandwidth effects. So obviously if you have high quality, that's going to use a bit more bandwidth. And the same for throttling. Don't want it to be throttled conservatively, moderately or aggressively. So we're going to disable that and not control it. And click next to continue. Next we have our provisioning settings screen. And in the basic section, enable provisioning. So is provisioning on or is provisioning off? Are the machines going to be built or aren't they? The next one is quite key. Stop provisioning on error. Say for example you went down here and said I want 1,000 desktops and there was an error. You don't want 1,000 errors. I want it to build the first one, spot an error, stop, alert you. You can go back and fix it before you re-provision the rest of the machines. Rather than provision all 1,000, have to delete them and redo them then. If it's 1,000, it's more to manage. If it's 1, it's not so many. Naming pattern. So what are we going to call this? This is the machine name. So this is what gets added to Active Directory as a machine name. So it has to be unique. So in this example, our naming pattern, we're going to use Win10-IC for instant clone, dash, and then we're going to do a curly bracket, an N, and a close curly bracket, which basically means it's going to put consecutive numbers in there. So the first desktop machine that gets built will be called Win10-IC-1. The second one, Win10-IC-2, -3, -4, -5, all the way up to the number of machines that you've built, which leads us on to desktop pool sizing. How many machines do we want as a maximum? So we're going to say 2 for this pool, and the number of spare, or how many machines are already powered on ready to go, that's 1. Then we can choose when they're built. So do we want them on demand, i.e. when a user logs in, they get a machine, or do we want to build them up front? So that will build all of the machines numbered in here. So in this case, it's going to build 2 machines. If it's 1,000, it's going to build 1,000. Unless there's an error, then obviously this is where this option comes in quite useful. Next, to continue, storage optimization is what we see next, and our storage policy management. This is grayed out now, but if we had VMware vSAN, we could select to use that. The other option here is to select separate data stores for replica and OS disks. When we build a replica, that's the disk that is going to be referred back to continually for our clone. So when it's looking to read and write, that's where it's going to go. Therefore, maybe we want to separate that onto a data store that is using tier 1 storage, so maybe SSD storage. The OS disk doesn't get hit quite so much, so therefore we might want to drop that down a few tiers and put that on some normal spinny disk somewhere in the data center. But if we select that, we have the option to put replica on one data store and OS on a different data store and on different storage platforms. Next, to continue, so now we see our vCenter settings and the image. So what are we going to use as our default image? So what's the parent VM? And that parent VM is located in vCenter, so we need to go find that by clicking Browse. So now we need to select the virtual machine that's going to be our parent, and that's our Windows 10 Gold image. So we select that and click OK. And as this is an instant clone and it's using snapshots, we need to tell it which snapshot to use. So if we had more than one, they'd be listed down here. If we highlight, it's going to tell us the snapshot details there. So again, we could go through to choose the right one, and we will select our snapshot there and click OK. Next, VM folder location. Where's the machine going to live? That's going to be our PVO data center. And then on to the resource settings. So which cluster? Be aware that you cannot have instant clones if you have a single ESX host. You have to have a cluster. No cluster, no instant clones. So we select our PVO Horizon cluster. Resource pool, that's going to be our cluster again. And then on to the data store. So where's it going to be stored? So here's our data stores. We're going to put it in the VM data store. So we click to select and then click OK. It says you've selected a local data store, so it's going to just tell you basically that you can't do vMotion because it's literally a single data store. And it says here, we also recommend that you use SSDs for instant clones. And then finally the network. So here we can actually choose which network the machine is going to connect to. So in this option, we've selected to use the same network as the current parent VM image. But if you had a different network for your desktops, you could uncheck that box and then go and find other networks. We only have one network here, so we're going to just leave that as the default, so it'll use the same network as the parent VM image. But as I said, if you have different networks, different subnets for your desktops versus your infrastructure, then these could be added in here. If you're happy with that, click Next to continue. And then we see our guest customization. So maybe you want to customize this desktop image. So which domain is it going to go in? Our PVO lab. And we could put this in a different AD container. So at the moment it's in the computers container. If you're going to browse, if you expand this, you will see all of our containers within Active Directory. So maybe you create one that just says Horizon Desktop, so you can apply different policies. And then the allow reuse of pre-existing computer accounts. So because desktops are going to be built and deleted and built and deleted, you don't want to keep creating existing or new computer accounts. So that means the machine could use an account that's already there. So if the machine name comes up again, already exists, I'll just reuse it. Next is use our clone prep. So that's basically going to do a cut down version of a sysprep. So we can power off scripts, power off script parameters, synchronization. So we can do some customizing there. So once we're happy with that, we click next to continue and we go straight to the summary screen. So on the summary screen, we can see a list of everything we've selected. So you might want to go through that, just check you've got everything correct. The other part on here is entitle users after the wizard finishes. We could tick this box. When the pool is built, it will go straight into the entitle users screen. So we're going to cover that in the next section. So we will do that later on. So if you're happy with this, we're literally going to click finish and allow it to go and build our desktop pool. So if we come back and look in our View Administrator main screen, we can see our Windows 10 Instant Clone pool has been created. We see the display name, it's an automated desktop pool, it's a vCenter Instant Clone, floating assignment using that vCenter. We don't have any users entitled just yet, we'll do that in the last section. It's enabled, we didn't create any shortcuts, and obviously there are no sessions running because we've not entitled any users to it. The other thing to look at is if we go to our vSphere client, we can see here in our data center, we can see our Windows 10 Instant Clone folders being created, and we can see that all the templates and the snapshots for our instant clones have all been created and ready to go. So that has successfully completed our Windows 10 Instant Clone desktop pool. In the next video, we're going to create a final desktop pool. This time, it will be a manual desktop pool using our Windows 7 image.